After 25 years of marriage, I found out my wife is cheating on me because I was infertile. I've been married for 25 years, though we don't have any kids of our own. My wife was divorced once before, and she had 2 daughters that I helped raise. They're 28 and 23 now. Honestly, before all this, I thought we had a pretty smooth marriage. Sure, we had our small issues here and there, but nothing major. We've always been able to talk openly about everything, whether it was work, venting frustrations, or even the more intimate side of things. A lot of times we'd just sit on the couch, talking about life, philosophy, whatever was on our minds. I felt like we had a strong connection, physically and emotionally. We also had a pretty active and satisfying sex life, and we've both kept in shape, living a healthy lifestyle. I work in the medical field, so over the past 5 months, I've been doing a lot of overtime with everything going on. She works in legal consulting and has been working from home for those same 5 months. That's made things a little distant between us, but we still spend quality time together on our days off. We've always been close. So last night, I was changing the filter on our Dyson fan in the bedroom, and I asked if I could use her phone to update the app since mine was charging near the front door. That's when I noticed something strange. She'd set up a pattern unlock on her phone. That felt odd, and I almost asked her about it. As I was looking for the app, a Snapchat notification popped up, and what it said made my stomach turn. It read, "I'll bring the special toy." I just froze. I saw the words, but it was like my brain refused to process them. I guess I sat there staring at the fan for a while, because she asked me what was wrong. I managed to pull it together and said something about checking the IP address and router for the fan. But inside, I was spiraling. My wife has this quarterly work trip that takes her 2 states away for about 5 days every few months. This next one was coming up on Monday. I've been on Reddit for years, reading stories like this, but never in a million years did I think I'd be the one living through it. There I was, sitting on my bedroom floor, feeling completely numb. I managed to recover, though, and played it off like everything was fine. I even told her I was just getting some info for the fan's app connection. But inside, I was falling apart. Yesterday, she logged into her Facebook on my Chromebook, and that gave me an idea. Today, I took a week off work on short notice. Thankfully, my supervisor is super understanding. When I explained what I might have uncovered, she didn't hesitate to give me the time I needed. I've been up all night reading through her messages. She left for the office earlier, so I made sure her Google location history and Find My Phone were turned on. Now, I'm suspicious of everything she does. I can't even look at myself in the mirror right now. She has no idea that I saw the Snapchat message. I also logged into Verizon's messaging system under her number and name. There are over 15,000 messages dating back. Back in February of last year, I found a series of messages between my wife and him. They weren't just casual texts, they were flirty memes, pictures, and even some X-rated stuff. The thing is, about 3 months ago, she stopped texting him through the Verizon app. She didn't stop texting him altogether, though. I'm pretty sure they switched to Snapchat because it's more private. I've never been on social media in any real way, so I had no idea how any of this worked. I just figured out you can't log into Snapchat with Facebook. All it takes is an email and password, and she's been using this very Chromebook for that. In fact, she used it 3 nights ago while lying in bed right next to me. She was rubbing my back, helping me fall asleep, and the whole time she was messaging him, sexting him, while I drifted off. He's a younger guy from her work, married with 3 little kids. I've even met him twice, shook his hand. His wife and he are all over Facebook. I'm at a total loss, wandering around this house I built for her with my own hands, trying to wrap my head around it. I almost can't feel anything anymore, but what little I can process is just pure, white-hot rage. I managed to log into her Snapchat, and there it all was. All the proof I needed. I've called my best friend, who's been through 3 divorces. Don't even get me started on his taste in partners. He recommended a ruthless lawyer. I'm planning on recording and saving everything I can. There are pictures of them, and I'm sure there's video on either his or her phone. I desperately want to wake up from this nightmare, but it's all too real. She said awful things about me, telling him my deepest insecurities. Worse yet, she's told him, "I love you." They haven't made any long-term plans, so this whole thing seems like it's just physical. That almost makes it easier to accept, but somehow it also makes it feel worse. Like she's throwing away our entire life for nothing more than a cheap fling. She knows cheating is a deal-breaker for me. Our usual routine when she leaves for her business trips is that I take her to the airport, kiss her goodbye, and watch her go. I can't even think about what I'm going to do now. My friend says I should print everything out, maybe even try to recover more from Snapchat, but from what I understand, I can't do that without her phone. So here's the plan. I'm meeting with the lawyer today. I'm paying an absurd amount to get an appointment with her as soon as possible, just to get the ball rolling and figure out my next steps. Part of me wants to book a flight, follow my wife to the hotel where she's staying, and catch her in the act. I've got access to her hotel booking info and even added myself as a contact person so I can get a room key without her knowing. I'm thinking of just logging into the messaging apps once I get there and watching it all unfold in real time. If I could get the divorce papers ready in time, I'd hand them to her right there, but that probably won't happen. Instead, I'll hand her the printouts. It's a 600-page PDF of every message. His wife accepted my friend request, and now I'm debating whether to send everything to her right away. I'm seething, but I don't want to make any moves that might hurt my chances. I'm going to fly out there and see this through. By Monday afternoon, I'll log into the messaging apps and see what they've been talking about. I'm planning to grab a room key to my wife's hotel room and leave an envelope there with my wedding ring inside. Then, I'll head to the hotel bar, sit down with a drink, and watch my phone light up as she finds it. My plan is to call the other guy, tell him to meet me in the lobby, better yet, the hotel bar, and to bring my wife with him. When we meet, I'll let him know that a similar package, complete with evidence, has been sent certified mail to his home, addressed to his wife. I've even got a Facebook message ready to go, and I'll hit send as I tell him. I know it feels petty and maybe even a little weak. I want to scream. I want to rage, but I just feel so helpless. This morning, all I could muster was a quick peck on her cheek as she left. I couldn't even look her in the eye. Somehow, I have to survive this weekend without losing my mind. The question is my spiteful, hate-fueled plan worth it? I'm at a point where all I want is to hurt her emotionally. I want her to feel the same level of pain that I do. I feel completely gutted, emasculated. There's no chance I'm accepting an apology. Cheating is unforgivable to me. It's not just a mistake. It's a series of deliberate steps, each one a chance to stop before crossing that line. But she didn't stop. She chose this. Should I confront her tonight? Or should I wait and catch her in the act? I don't think I'll update after this. Honestly, I'm thinking about quitting social media for good. Going forward, I can't imagine being with anyone who doesn't share my outlook on privacy and loyalty. Oh, and I found the special toy. Keep in mind, we already have a chest full of adult toys, but this one was already packed in her carry-on. It's one of those high-end remote control vibrators, the kind you control with an app. Looks expensive, too. Anyway, I'm meeting the lawyer in about 90 minutes. Update. I didn't know how to post an update, so I'm just adding this here. I met with the lawyer and honestly, she was kind, compassionate even. She made it clear that her job was to fight for my future, and my job was to tell her the truth, no matter how ugly, and not make things harder for her. After the meeting, I went to Kinko's to print out all the messages. Cost me $534 in color prints because I wanted the photos to really stand out. Shout out to Chris at Kinko's, by the way. He didn't make a fuss when the nudes started coming out of the printer, but he did ask what this was all about. I told him, and he looked stunned but shook my hand and said he was sorry. After that, I went home and crashed for about 3 hours. My soon-to-be ex-wife came home around 7:30, her usual time. The lawyer advised against some dramatic confrontation in the hotel bar, saying it would look ridiculous and wouldn't reflect well on me. So, sorry to everyone hoping for a Hollywood-style showdown. She's right, it's better to keep it clean. There are 2 ways this divorce could go: contested or non-contested. I'll have to notify my wife that I've retained a lawyer, and from there, she'll have to decide if she wants to contest it or will go through mediation and file the paperwork. So, she came home about 2 hours ago. I asked her if there was anything on her mind she wanted to talk about. She just said, Nothing, other than the election. Then she asked me what was bothering me. I wanted to break down right then and there, but honestly, I think I'm all cried out. Instead, I just said I was curious why she had a remote control vibrator packed in her luggage. The look on her face said everything. I've never seen someone go pale so fast. She looked panicked, started breathing heavily, and sweating. I asked her who had the app to control it. She stammered and couldn't get a coherent word out. Then the tears started. That's when I pulled out my 3 file folders filled with their text exchanges. I asked, "Does the AP's wife have access to this, too?" She broke down even more, crying and pleading, saying she could explain everything. I told her she had 5 minutes to try. Of course, she couldn't explain a thing. So I told her exactly what my attorney advised me to say. Then I told her to leave. She screamed back, "This is my house too." I stayed calm and said, "Maybe, but if you don't leave, I'm telling everyone about your affair. Even the girls will know." I reminded her she'd be at her work conference for the week anyway, so she should find somewhere else to stay in the meantime. She was speechless. I calmly pulled up Facebook, showed her the AP's wife, and asked, "Do you want me to tell her, or are you going to do it right now?" More tears, more pleading, telling me how much she loves me and that it wasn't supposed to go this far. Then she hit me with my personal favorite, "You can't do this." I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Well, it looks like I just did." As I sent a message to the AP's wife, attaching the file of their little escapades, I included an apology and a brief explanation. Haven't heard back from her yet. After that, I started leafing through the stacks of papers, reading random excerpts aloud to my soon-to-be ex-wife. Stuff like, "I just wish we could spend the whole day together. You inside me, attached to each other. And, you feel so much more intense than any other woman I've ever been with." She was still sobbing, begging me to talk about us, telling me our marriage could survive this mistake. I told her flat out that I'll never forgive her for this. I said she threw away the last 17 years for nothing. I'm still considering telling HR, too, and letting everyone know she chose to end our marriage by cheating. To everyone who's reached out, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't respond to all the messages. I've scheduled a therapy appointment for Tuesday. Right now, I feel an odd mix of being elated and absolutely crushed. My hands are shaking, and I feel so low. Part of me doesn't even want to keep going. The house is quiet now, except for her crying and moaning. I told her not to come back after her trip. I've been sending friend requests and getting everyone onto my Facebook page. I'm just going to send the story to everyone all at once. Tomorrow, I'm going to call the girls. I raised them from the time they were 11 and 6. They're 28 and 23 now, grown women, and I don't even know what to say or how to break this to them. Update. I've had nearly 1,000 requests for an update. My therapist told me that sharing might help me focus and heal. To the people saying, "That's not how Snapchat works." You're right. She had WhatsApp running in the background. At this point, though, I really don't care. I saw everything I needed to. Also, shout out to Dyson for their app and that amazing fan. Played a role in all this. This might be a bit of a deeper dive into my background, but I think it'll help explain why I feel the way I do. My original post was more of a stream of consciousness, written when I was feeling completely disjointed, so here goes. I went to college in Las Vegas back in the mid-90s, and I graduated in 1999. To say I had a blast would be an understatement. I really made the most of those years. I got around, had fun, and during that time I decided marriage wasn't for me. I saw it as an outdated concept that took away your independence, and I absolutely didn't want kids. After I got my nursing degree, I quickly excelled in cardiovascular intensive care. In 2001, I moved back home to Texas to pursue my master's degree and become an advanced practice RN/nurse practitioner with a focus on cardiovascular surgery. While I was doing that, I decided to push even further and go for medical school. I shifted my coursework to fit the prerequisites for med school applications, and it was around then that I met my soon-to-be ex-wife. She was short, a little on the thicker side, what people these days might call curvy, with fiery red hair and a personality to match. We met in a class and the attraction was instant. It didn't take long for us to get serious, and within 3 months, we were saying, "I love you." At the time, she was already a mom to 2 girls. Remember, I had been dead set on not having kids, but she had been divorced for about 2 years and was just getting out of an on-again, off-again relationship when we met. We dated for about 2 years before she gradually introduced me to her daughters, who were 11 and 6 at the time. One night, she sat me down for a pretty heartfelt but practical conversation about where we were heading. She told me, straight up, that it was time to either get serious and get married or go our separate ways. I was still pretty anti-marriage, and she knew that, but she was giving me a chance to think about our future together. She made a good point. We had been living together for about 8 months, and we already listed each other as emergency contacts. She joked that the only thing missing was adding each other to our health insurance plans. It was an honest talk, and we both agreed to keep things going for a bit longer, but I knew I had to make a decision soon. Then, about 2 weeks later, I got my acceptance letter to medical school. It was a huge moment for me. I had just turned 26, and this was one of my biggest life goals. The school was about 2 hours away, and I was ecstatic, but also crushed. Suddenly, it hit me that I'd barely see her or the girls. I started second-guessing everything. Medical school, then residency, followed by a fellowship. That was going to be a 7-year grind. During that time, I wouldn't be able to support the lifestyle we'd grown used to, and the thought of losing her during those long years just tore me apart. So, I made the decision to decline the offer and switched back to. After I decided against medical school, I went for my master's in nursing administration. We ended up getting married in July 2003 in a small, intimate ceremony with just close family and friends. My parents have always adored the girls, and rightly so. They're wonderful. But they've always been a bit distant when it comes to my soon-to-be ex-wife. When I told them on Monday what was going on, and that there was a real possibility the girls might no longer be as involved in their lives, they hit me with something that really stung. They said they always thought she was damaged goods, because she'd been married before and had forced me to compromise on things I wanted. And to a certain extent, they were right. After I graduated, I realized I didn't want to be a manager or a director. I'm the type of guy who likes to be hands-on, taking care of patients. The hospital I worked at offered a certification in ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, and a perfusionist credential. It was a super competitive process, but I got in. For the past 11 years, I've been doing ECMO and all the related work, and while it's been incredibly challenging, it's also been rewarding and, at times, heartbreaking. My wife, on the other hand, decided about 5 years ago that she was done with being an RN on the floor. She wanted something more stable, a 9 to 5 that didn't involve patients or all the drama. Through a friend, she landed a job at a multi-state legal consultancy that specializes in medical legal lawsuits. Now, she abstracts data from patient charts and presents it in the format her clients need. So that's the background. Now, fast forward to Saturday morning, D-Day +2. I only slept for a few hours and woke up with dark, disturbing thoughts about my future. I was stuck in a loop, imagining scenarios of violence. Against them, against myself. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's the truth. I was in the kitchen, making breakfast, just eggs and toast, when she walked in, still groggy and barely awake. She asked me to make her some breakfast too. I just stared at her, then tossed what I'd made into the trash right in front of her. After that, I cranked up the record player and started blasting music from my youth, at an uncomfortable volume, just to keep her from trying to talk to me. I know, real mature, right? I started what I now call pain shopping. I sat down with the printouts of their messages and began reading them in chronological order. It was brutal, but I couldn't stop. Part of me recommends it, but part of me doesn't. By the afternoon, I'd moved on from Black Flag and the Dam to Chris Isaac and Ray LaMontagna. Heartbreak anthems, perfect for the mood. At some point, she approached me again, but this time, she was almost indignant. She asked me what good it did to tell the AP's wife about their affair. I stared at her, dumbfounded, for what felt like way too long before I finally told her. At least now the AP's wife gets the chance to make an informed decision about her future, instead of sacrificing for someone who would betray her so selfishly. I guess my message got through, because things were not looking good for the AP. She sat down on the couch and started tearing up, sobbing again. I just looked at her and told her I was cried out. There was nothing left in me. More accurately, I was so numb that crying just wasn't on the table at that moment. I told myself I'd deal with those emotions later, after I'd done what needed to be done. She asked me, her voice timid now, completely stripped of the bravado and indignation she'd shown earlier, what else I planned to do. I looked at her and said, ruin your life, and make sure you feel the pain I'm feeling right now. I told her that if she had any respect or love left for me, she'd unlock her phone and show me everything. She refused, saying it didn't matter, and all I'd do is use it against her. I admitted that there's a part of me, the completionist part, that wanted to know every last detail. But she still refused and went to the guest bedroom without another word. That's when I found her new hire paperwork from work. I noticed they had a corporate compliance line, so I called and left a detailed message. I told them that she and the AP had discussed client information that included protected health data over an unsecured, non-approved messaging app. I also mentioned that, during this time, she had been his acting supervisor on 2 projects, while they were exchanging sexually inappropriate messages. Lastly, I added that both of them had used their company-subsidized phones to send pornographic material, including pictures and sexting videos. I knew that would be a big no. I've always thought of myself as a peaceful, rational guy, but this whole situation has shattered that part of me. I don't even recognize myself anymore. The anger, it feels endless. I'm honestly a little worried about where it's all coming from and if it'll ever stop. I know that, eventually, to get past this, I'll have to accept her apology and somehow forgive her for her mistakes. But right now, I don't know if I'm capable of that, and the thought of it worries me. That evening, I continued notifying family and friends about what had happened and what she'd done. I called a physician friend and asked for a favor, an appointment for a checkup and an STD test. He had questions, of course, and I answered them, but it was exhausting. By 8 p.m., my eyes were getting heavy. Sunday, D-Day +3, I decided to drive out to see the girls. They live about 3 hours away. The youngest is still in college and has at least another semester left, maybe more, thanks to 2020 and everything that's happened. Since all of this started, I've had some pretty intense feelings about them. Over the years, I've formed a respectful, friendly relationship with both of them, but it's never been exactly fatherly. The oldest, especially, keeps me at a distance. We're cordial, but there's always that underlying "you're not my dad" vibe. The youngest is more open, but when they're together, it's clear that I'll always be the outsider. I left early Sunday, around 5 a.m., and got to their condo a little after 8:45. I brought them breakfast, tacos, and some good coffee. They were worried about their mom before I even said anything. I got straight to the point and told them the situation, that their mother had cheated and would likely be moving out in the next 3 to 6 months. Looking back, I can honestly say it was the right call to tell them face to face. They were disappointed in her, understandably. I made sure they knew I wasn't there to pressure them into picking sides. They're adults now, and that's not my place. I told the girls they were in a unique position in this whole situation, and if they decided they didn't want to continue a relationship with me, I'd understand. I admitted I'd be a little let down, sure, but also somewhat relieved. However, I made it clear that whatever they chose about our relationship shouldn't interfere with their relationship with my parents, their grandparents. They both agreed they still wanted to keep in touch with them, which was a relief. I left their place around 11 a.m. and headed home. On the way, I stopped at my best friend's house and finally broke down. I'd helped raise those girls as best I could, especially since their father had been largely absent throughout their childhood. He'd started another family 6 hours away and wasn't much of a presence in their lives. My best friend could see I was falling apart and decided I'd had enough to drink over the past 72 hours. He told me I needed rest more than anything, so I crashed at his place for the night. I'd noticed my phone had been blowing up with texts from my soon-to-be ex-wife after I left the girl's place. But honestly, I was too tired and in too dark of a place to care. By Monday, D-Day +4, I got home around 8 a.m. and saw her Porsche still in the driveway. For a second, I thought maybe she had taken an Uber or Lyft to the airport, but no, she hadn't left. She was inside, up, and had breakfast waiting. She asked me to sit and eat with her, so I did. She asked how it tasted, and I told her, like static. Then I added that, honestly, I've had a hard time tasting or feeling anything other than bitterness and anger for the past 5 days. She had called in sick and skipped her quarterly meeting. She tried to talk about how worried she was for me and how much she still loved me. She mentioned getting a call from the oldest daughter yesterday around noon, saying the girls were deeply disturbed by her behavior. I couldn't help it. I laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It had this manic edge to it that even caught me off guard. I looked at her and said, "Oh, you love me so much, huh? That's why you had an affair behind my back for a year and a half? You love me so much you threw away half of my life with another married man." I told her it was worse because she never gave me a reason for why she did it, and the lack of explanation made the betrayal even more painful. I walked over to the liquor cabinet and pulled out a bottle. It was an 18-year Glenfiddich that my grandfather had bought for us when we got married. It had been our tradition to share a small sip of it every anniversary to remind ourselves that, like the whiskey, things get better with time and patience. I chugged the rest of the bottle, about a third of it was still left. I looked at her and said, "Sorry I didn't offer you any, but you don't deserve it." Then I went to the bedroom and started taking down every picture of us or her from the walls. I placed them all on the kitchen table. She had left by then. A little while later I got a call. Not from her, but from her paralegal. They told me the petition for divorce was ready, and I needed to sign off before it could be officially filed, after which she'd be served. I signed the divorce papers quickly, still buzzed on premium scotch, and hit send. Shortly after, I got a message from the AP's wife. She reluctantly thanked me for revealing the truth, saying it was horrible but necessary. She didn't want to speak directly but messaged to let me know she'd found texts and videos of her husband with other women, not just my soon-to-be ex-wife. She had kicked him out and was already planning to see an attorney. They live in California, so their legal battle would start soon. I sat back, put on some music, and had a few more drinks. I must have passed out around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I woke up briefly when I heard her come home around 10 o'clock. She saw the pile of photos and mementos on the table, things that had once meant something to us. She started sobbing and begged me to talk to her. I only had one question. Why? She kept repeating, "I don't know," over and over. I was pretty drunk at that point, so my filter was long gone. I called her some vile names and reminded her that it took a lot of deliberate choices to even send that first text, let alone carry on the affair for a year and a half. She was the one who started it. I couldn't stop laughing bitterly. Then I stood up, started stripping off my clothes, and said, "You threw away this?" Pointing to myself. I know I was being harsh, but I'm 6 feet 4 inches, weigh about 200 pounds, and up until last week, I was still jogging and lifting weights 4 times a week. I couldn't wrap my head around how she traded me for some pot-bellied, needle-dicked guy who couldn't give her what she needed. I went to the shower to sober up a little. When I came out, she was in bed, naked, with candles lit. She begged me to sleep with her. I turned on my camera and asked her to repeat what she just said. Shout out to everyone who suggested I record it, for whatever reason, just in case. My body may have responded, but I didn't want her in any meaningful way. I was numb. I wasn't kind about it either. I put her in uncomfortable positions and told her I wanted anal and to hear her beg for it. I recorded the whole thing. Afterward, I was left with a whirlwind of emotions. I love her, but I'm indifferent to her. I hate her, yet I don't care about her at the same time. I want her, but it hurts to even think about us anymore. We fell asleep together, but when I woke up, I was hungover and couldn't stand to look at myself in the mirror. Tuesday, D-Day +5. I had a therapy session. It lasted 2.5 hours. I didn't know it at the time, but she followed me there and waited to confront me afterward. When she saw me, she asked what I was doing, and I told her flat out, "I'm getting therapy for the emotional trauma of realizing I wasted most of my life on someone who couldn't even give me a reason for why she cheated on me." I was loud, teary-eyed, and my soon-to-be therapist witnessed the whole thing. I lost it, calling her horrible names and even saying I wished she was dead. Not my finest moment, but I was beyond broken. Needless to say, that therapy session was intense. The therapist prescribed some sedatives to help me calm down, and we scheduled a shorter follow-up session for Thursday. We talked about my anger, my sense of betrayal, and the deep feeling of emasculation I couldn't shake. I explained to my therapist that I'm terrified of the unknown. Just last week, I felt like a complete man. I had a vision for my life, goals, and a partner to face whatever challenges came our way. Now, I'm like a ship without a rudder or mast, completely lost, with no sense of direction or power to steer myself away from this mess. The therapist then brought up the question of why, the one that's been haunting me. He explained that it's not just one question. It's a series of questions. The idea is to get to the root of the behavior, to understand what motivated it. He suggested I ask my soon-to-be ex-wife what, within herself, gave her permission to betray me. He emphasized that this is just the starting point, but it stuck with me the most. When I told him about the sex, he advised me to set explicit boundaries regarding any physical interaction going forward. Ultimately, he recommended that I stop altogether, warning me that it would only confuse things and make everything worse, especially if reconciliation wasn't my goal. I cried. I raged. By the end of the session, I was completely exhausted. When I walked out, she was still there, waiting outside for me. I didn't even acknowledge her. I just walked past as she pleaded with me to talk. Later, I got a call from the physician's office to schedule my STD test, so I went in for the appointment. I gave them the short version of what had happened. The doctor advised me to stop drinking and to take the sedatives cautiously. When I got home, I continued packing up my things. I made the decision that I would move out. It was time. I called my workplace and requested a face-to-face meeting. There's no way I could focus on life-and-death situations at work with my current state of mind. I drove to the hospital's administrative building and met with my team, formally giving my 6-week notice. Given how specialized my job is, 6 weeks is the bare minimum. I explained that the stress from my wife's actions had created an unbearable home life and that I would be a detriment to the patients, the team, and myself if I stayed in the area. I decided I needed to move far away, put some real distance between me and all of this. After that, I picked up some groceries. I hadn't eaten much more than a few bites of food all week and had been surviving mostly on liquor. But I decided to follow the advice of both my therapist and my physician friend and make myself some real food. When I got home, I found her sitting in the dark in the living room, drinking wine. She'd gone through the pile of pictures and organized them, looking through memories that used to mean something. She was wearing one of her date night dresses, and her makeup was a mess from crying. When she saw me, she stood up and tried to hug me, but I gently pushed her away. I made a point of pulling out my phone and hitting record. She immediately broke down, crying again. Through the tears, she told me that the AP's wife had called her and told her about his other women. She said that knowing there were others hurt her so much, she kept begging me to reconsider, to think about us. I just looked at her and said, "Why bother? You didn't think about us when you betrayed me." I told her I was sorry her lies had finally caught up with her, but it seemed like she was more upset about getting caught than actually being remorseful for what she did to me. I told her she seemed more worried about having to start over than about losing any love she supposedly had for me. I said, "You abandoned our love 2 years ago when you made the decision to cheat." I kept piling it on, making it clear that she wasn't going to escape responsibility this time. I also told her about my call to the corporate compliance line and the specific rules she'd broken. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lash out. I was shaking a little, but it was like everything inside me was leaving in a rush. The strange mix of feeling elated and completely empty all at once. When I was done, I put away the few groceries I'd bought, made myself a small sandwich, and then went to bed. She followed me there again like she had the night before. I pulled out my phone and told her, with the recorder going, exactly what my therapist had said about sex between us. Keep in mind, in 17 years of marriage, I can't recall a single time I refused her or declined. But I told her I wasn't interested and asked her to leave and sleep in the guest bedroom. She refused. I said, "Fine then," and let it go. By Wednesday, D-Day +6, I woke up to find her curled up next to me. I carefully got out of bed and did some light exercises to clear my head. I've been working on my resume, getting job applications out, and I might be working in Seattle by the end of the year. I love my parents, and it's going to be hard leaving them behind, especially as they're getting older. We live 20 minutes away from each other right now, but I can't stay in this city. The thought of running into her, even after all of this is over, is something I can't bear. I need to be free of all the reminders, the sense of loss, and the compromises I made. It was a pretty bleak day, rainy, off and on, and that suited my mood just fine. I met up with my best friend for an early dinner, and we decided not to drink. I gave him a full rundown of what had been going on. My attorney reassured me that moving away wouldn't affect the financial outcome of the divorce, so I'm going to live off my PTO until the end of October and use my half of the savings to relocate and settle in. Honestly, I feel empty inside. My friend made jokes and I tried to laugh, but it took so much effort. There's this deep emptiness pulling at me, stronger than I've ever felt. I've never seriously thought about ending my own life, but lately, these daydreams have crept in, wondering what it would be like if I wasn't here. I'm definitely going to tell my therapist about this tomorrow. As for her, she's been spending a lot of time at the library. I've been tracking her movements through Google, and apparently, she's been reading a bunch of relationship books. Meanwhile, I've been reading Chump Lady. It's great stuff, and it's been helping me keep things in perspective. She got a call from her work earlier. I only overheard a bit of it, but it sounds like she has a meeting tomorrow, even though she's still pretending to be sick. And now, she's back in bed again, just like, the past few nights have been a blur. I'm so conflicted. I want to feel something, but all I can muster is hate and resentment toward her. The only type of sex I seem to want right now is harsh, almost sadistic. I'll admit, during that rough, abusive sex we had on Monday, I felt the strange, almost euphoric high, like a runner's high. But afterward, there was a crash, and by the next day I was furious with myself. I'm doubting myself a little when it comes to whether or not I really want her back. I know she messed up in the worst way possible, but I don't know if I can ever truly forgive or forget. I'm a tangled mess. So, I laid out the ground rules to her again with my phone recording. I made it clear that any sex we were having didn't mean reconciliation or some secret signal that I wanted to get back together. I told her this was probably just hysterical bonding and that it wasn't healthy. I also told her I wouldn't be gentle, nor would I care about her feelings or needs during it. She was teary-eyed but nodded, saying she understood. Then, in a quiet voice, she said she deserved it. She rolled over and got on all fours. By Thursday, D-Day +7, I woke up with her spooning me. I laid there for a while, listening to her breathing change, feeling her eyes on me. With my back still turned, I asked, "What's your meeting today about?" She said it was with an HR representative and that it was probably going to be bad. I just said, "Yep." Then she asked me what she could do to make things right between us, to somehow make things equal again. I told her, nothing. She offered to let me have an open marriage, saying she wouldn't pursue anyone but would give me the freedom to do whatever I wanted. I chuckled and said, "No, I don't trust you." She admitted that was fair. We had this whole conversation with me facing away from her. It was easier than looking at her. I asked her, "What was it in this marriage that made you so unhappy you'd do this?" Her response was baffling. She said I was beyond great. I couldn't help but laugh. Well, obviously, that doesn't matter. She tried to explain, saying it was about the adventure, that she lived for the rush. She didn't realize how badly she'd messed up or how many people would get hurt until it was too late. She said confronting her was both a massive relief and an unforgettable pain all at once. I got up and made us breakfast like I was on autopilot. Later, I went to my therapist and shared my plan about work, along with the responses I'd already received to my applications. I told him everything about my wife and the sex. We discussed my suicidal thoughts again, and he walked me through how to handle them if they came up. He wasn't judging, just helping me process so I wouldn't get lost in the confusion. It was a shorter session, just under 2 hours, but I left feeling that strange calm again, like nothing mattered in that moment. Everything just was. When I got home, she was sitting in the living room. She told me she'd been fired for breaching client confidentiality and violating data security protocols. All I could say was, well, that's too bad. I went about my day, exercised, and made myself a nice dinner. She joined me, but we didn't say much. While we were sitting in the living room, she told me that the AP had been fired as well. My response was simple, good. Then she added that she hadn't had any contact with him for 5 days. I asked, why not? You're both free now. You could fly out to your soulmate and have all the fun you want. She insisted that I was the only one she wanted. Couldn't help but laugh at that. No, you had me. All of me. And it still wasn't enough. I told her that, over the nearly 20 years of our relationship and work, I had been approached and hit on countless times. But I managed not to fall in love with anyone else. That's why I'm so bitter and angry now, because of the compromises I made for her. She asked, what compromises? I laid it all out. I told her about my dream of going to medical school, but how I decided to marry her and opt for stability instead. How I didn't want kids, but since they were part of her life, I accepted them and compromised. I said, I made those sacrifices for our love, but clearly, I misplaced my trust and love in you. I told her that if I could go back in time, I'd tell my 26-year-old self to pass her up entirely. She asked again, desperately, what she could do to fix things between us. I was blunt. There's nothing you can do. I will never compromise for you again. And without that, we can never have a healthy relationship. I told her I would never love her again. At best, she would be nothing more than a sex toy to me. She wouldn't factor into my plans or my life beyond that. Just a week ago, she was the first person I thought of when I woke up, and the last person I thought about before going to sleep. Now, it hurts too much to even think about her. I'm walking away from this. I feel like continuing this is just dragging me back into things I don't want to keep replaying in my mind. I've been lucky to chat with some kind people who shared their own pain and stories, which have helped me immensely, but I keep reliving emotions I'd rather walk away from. I'm still confused about what I want. I don't know if I'll ever feel 100% sure about anything with her again. For now, I have bi-weekly therapy sessions lined up for the next 4 weeks. So far, it's been 3 sessions, and I'm making progress, but I'm afraid I'm still far from sorting through this disaster. It's been an interesting 5 weeks. I've learned a lot. I moved out about 3 days after my last update. Since then, my soon-to-be ex-wife constantly texts me and leaves notes on my apartment door and my car. I told my lawyer about it, and he offered to send her a stern cease and desist letter. I'm still contemplating whether to do that or not. My therapist has complimented me on the progress I've made. He's confident that I'll be able to manage the anger, despair, and depression I initially felt. I agree with him, I'm doing better. One last thing. My ex and I had sex one final time the night before I moved out. I made it clear again that it didn't mean anything. I wanted her to know that it was truly over. I made it crystal clear to her that the last time we had sex meant nothing and would not change my mind about reconciliation. She said she understood, but with her constant attempts to communicate, I'm not convinced she's accepted it. She was served notice of the divorce petition in the first week of October. Since then, the love bombing and attempts at hoovering have been borderline psychotic. The earliest hearing is probably in January. If she sticks to her word, it'll be a quick process. If she wants to fight, fine. I'm ready for that too. She managed to get another job about a week after being fired, which just goes to show you, it's all about who you know. Either way, I'm good. I've come to terms with her shortcomings as both a person and a spouse. I told her I'd never forgive her, but I've accepted that it happened and I'm moving on with my life from here. Over the last 3 weeks, I've had 2 unexpected surprises. First, my stepdaughters came to visit me. I told them straight up that if their mother had put them up to it, they didn't need to bother. But my oldest insisted they came on their own. Apparently, they had a long talk with their mother about the affair, and our relationship came up. My oldest stepdaughter had always carried a huge chip on her shoulder when it came to me, but she ended up apologizing for that. It turns out she had some pretty big misconceptions about me. When my ex and I first started dating, there had been some overlap with her on-again, off-again guy from before we got together. My stepdaughters had assumed I was that guy. They hadn't met him, but they knew about him. And since their father spent most of their lives bad-mouthing their mother for cheating, they had the wrong impression about the situation. What they didn't know was that their dad had also cheated on her but never admitted it to them. So, long story short, my oldest stepdaughter apologized and asked for forgiveness. That was a heavy weekend, and yet another reminder of how infidelity and dishonesty can ripple through people's lives long after the fact. Now, I want to address some of the accusations regarding the sex my ex requested during this time. She's always been into BDSM, but I was never fully into it. The biggest issue, apparently, was that I didn't provide aftercare for her. Here's the thing, I took classes, I went to workshops, and I learned how to be a dom, all to make her happy. But I'm done trying to make her happy. She lost that privilege, along with my respect. And when the respect goes, that's pretty much the death of any marriage. The second surprise came from a longtime coworker. She works in a different department, but we've known each other for years. I've decided to stay on as a PRN worker, just part-time when needed, but it's been interesting. Word of my pending divorce and all the hospital gossip has reached her. She's noticed that I've started wearing my wedding ring on a chain now, and well, after some insistence, she convinced me to let her take me out for a drink. I told her straight up that, one way or another, I wouldn't be around for much longer and had zero interest in any kind of relationship. She just smiled, squeezed my hand, and said she had no intention of being with me forever. She just wanted to my brains out and give me a try. She's been spending the night a couple of times a week, and honestly, I've enjoyed it. She even helped me pack my carry-on and dropped me off at the airport when I flew out for my interview in Seattle. I crushed the interview, by the way. Got a call from the travel agent afterward, and they had a bunch of opportunities lined up for me. I'm seriously considering the travel gig. It sounds appealing. I could crash at my parents' place between contracts, which would give me some flexibility. I'm still not sure what I want to do. It's oddly terrifying to suddenly be free from the responsibility of another person and feel this liberated. It happened so fast. My lawyer told me there won't be any alimony or spousal support since we live in a no-fault state. So infidelity doesn't affect the actual divorce. But, with proof of the cheating, it does affect the division of assets. She said it might swing in my favor as much as 70/30ths. The sale of the house is inevitable. I asked a realtor to run comps, and the amount we'd get would be substantial. Not enough to make up for 17 years down the drain, but a decent chunk of change. I'm seriously thinking about taking a 3-month tour of Europe once everything's settled. For the first time in a long time, I'm starting to feel again, and most of it's positive. I'm definitely not in the best place, but I'm nowhere near as bad as I could be. Thank you to all the Redditors who reached out. Some of y'all's chats were amazing, and combined with therapy, it's made a huge difference. This will be my last update. I'm going back to lurking anonymously, and I hope I never have to post again.